I'd like to welcome you to the orientation for Math 130, also known as Statistics, at Rio Hondo College, and welcome you to the course as well. Allow me to introduce myself briefly. My name is Mark Luttrell, and I've been teaching mathematics at Rio Hondo for a good number of years, and I've been teaching statistics for quite a few years as well. Let's get started. At the first meeting of a traditional face-to-face class, I always take some time to go over a few things, the syllabus, for example, and a few other things so that people have a smooth start. And, for an online section, we don't really have a first meeting per se. We don't have any meetings. And even in the case of a face-to-face section, there's frequently people who end up adding late or they miss part of that orientation for one reason or another. And so that's the purpose of this video, is to get you up to speed and to help you have a smooth start in the course. Now you can see on the screen in front of you here a syllabus. It happens that this one is for an online section, and it's from the fall of 2018 term. Now you may be taking the course in a traditional face-to-face format, or you may be taking it during some other term. It really doesn't matter, because at this point in the game, there's not a lot that changes in the syllabus. The time-sensitive things like dates and so on, those change, but the rest of the content is fairly static. So if you're taking this course during some other term, I'm sure that you'll still benefit from the orientation. First thing I always mention is the contact information. If you look up at the top of the syllabus there, I have the phone number for my office, and I have my email address. And if you're looking to get in touch with me, by far the email is the best, because I don't check voicemail when I'm not on campus typically, and I check email several times a day. And because I appreciate it when people give me a timely response to my emails, I try to return that same courtesy, and I try to give a timely response. So I do check email several times a day, and if you're emailing me, I prefer that you not do it through Canvas. My Outlook automatically routes incoming messages from Canvas to a less visible area of my inbox, and that's not the case when you email me directly. So if you need to get in contact, I would strongly encourage you use the email address that you see there on the screen in front of you, and drop me a line. Now, one thing I should mention, I typically have several sections during any given term, and so it's very helpful when someone emails if they make sure to indicate clearly in the subject header and or the body of the message what class they're referring to. That saves us both a fair amount of time if we don't have to go back and forth to get that figured out. Now, one thing that you may be wondering about is, where would I get my syllabus for my term? And that's a good question. Usually at the start of a term, I send out an email to everyone who's enrolled and who's on the official waiting list. And as a courtesy, I attach the syllabus to that email. It's kind of like a welcome to the class email. Now that is sent to the address that you have in your Rio Hondo College profile. And so for most people, it means it's the email that ends at the domain my.riohondo.edu. And sometimes people don't activate those accounts, or there's a variety of other issues. But that's where it goes, unless you have some other address in your Rio Hondo profile. So that's one place you can look for it. You can log in and activate that email, and you can search around and find it. It's an attachment. I also post the syllabus in Canvas, so you can also get it from there. You just log into Canvas, go to your course, and then click on the files, and it'll be in a folder there. I have another location where I post it as well. So variety of places you can get the syllabus. But anyway, it would probably be helpful if you actually had the syllabus from your term in front of you, as you watch this orientation. Print it out or look at it on a screen, whatever. But it'll be much easier to follow along if you're looking at the current material from your own term. On the front page of your syllabus, you're going to see some information like what you see on the screen in front of you here regarding the text. This is something that people frequently ask about, and we're going to have more to say about it in a few minutes, but for the moment, suffice it to say that this is the text that we were using at the time of the recording. That may or may not be the case in the future, but in any case, We are using a custom edition, which is pictured on the left side, and that is derived from the stock edition, which is pictured on the right side. And so at the time of this recording, the custom edition is the Rio Hondo Custom 3rd edition, and the stock edition is the 5th edition of Sullivan's Statistics. And these are functionally identical, but we try to save you some money, and so that's why we're presenting the bundle with the custom edition. And we'll talk more about the bundle in just a moment. Down at the bottom of the front page of your syllabus is something else that also generates a lot of questions, and that is the minimum student materials. So if you'll notice, the first item on that list is the required textbook bundle. We're going to talk about that in a moment. The second item on that list is a bit cryptic to some. It is basically a graphing calculator, and what we're trying to indicate there with the TI 83/plus/SE/84 is that we're going to be happy with pretty much any model from the TI 83 or 84 lines. And there are many, as you can see. Texas Instruments has a bewildering array of various graphing calculators. So the ones that we're interested in supporting for this class in particular are the ones from the 83 and the 84 lines, as you can see here. And there are many, many models. So you could use a TI 83 or an 83 Plus, as you see pictured here. It's one of the older models. It's been updated somewhat, but very functional for what we need. You can use the 84, 84 Plus, Silver Edition, color screen, so on and so forth. All of these are perfectly fine, and they will be well supported by the textbook. Now, over the years, some people have used other models, like for example a Casio or whatever, and that's perfectly fine, but it's not as well supported by the text or by the videos that we use for the course. So please be advised, if you're going to use some other model, a Casio or something else, it might be able to help you a little bit with that, but in general, you're going to be on your own to figure out how that's going to work. And so you'll be responsible to make sure that it does what we need it to do, and so on and so forth. The only thing that we prohibit with regard to graphing calculators is ones that have a built-in computer algebra system. And so typically you'll know that because the name of the calculator says CAS, which is an abbreviation for computer algebra system. For example, you can see here there's a TI Inspire model that has a computer algebra system, and so that would be illegal. We will not permit you to use that kind of a calculator during an exam or something like that. And so if you're found to have one during an exam, that's treated as cheating. And so it really actually doesn't help you for statistics, but it can cause you to fail an exam. So we would strongly encourage you to go with the program on that and go with the required model. Now, you might have noticed on the front page of the syllabus there a little blurb down at the bottom about being able to rent a calculator. And so it's perfectly understandable if somebody balks at buying a calculator for a single class. And we have a finite supply of calculators that can be rented on campus from the Math and Science Division office. That office is in room S233. That is in the Science Building. It's on the second floor off the main hallway there. And there's tremendous demand for these calculators, and so they do tend to rent out very fast. I'm not sure the price for this particular term, but typically it's about 1/3 the purchase price of a calculator. And so if you're interested in doing a rental, I would encourage you to get to campus post haste and get that arranged as quickly as possible, because very often by the end of the first week, those calculators have long since been rented out. So keep that in mind, and if you have any questions about that, feel free to drop me a line. Now, regarding that last item on the list of minimum student materials, the Scantron forms that we may be needing, I'll have more to say about that when we get to the part of the syllabus that covers exam policy. But what I want to talk about now is where we do business, or in other words, the different websites and portals that we use to support your course. Now, the primary one is Canvas, and by that I mean the Rio Hondo Canvas portal. In other words, this portal. To get to Canvas, you come to the main page for the college. And in this version of the page right here, they have put the icon for Canvas up in the upper right-hand corner. You can see this little red circle right here. It says Canvas underneath it. So if you click on that, that opens this page right here. And this is probably the one that you would want to bookmark. It's the most convenient one. Now, something that's new as of the summer of 2018 and going forward is that anyone using Canvas is going to be required to have a CCC ID. That is a California Community College ID. So it may be possible the first time you log into Canvas, you may be detoured to obtain a CCC ID. It is fairly straightforward. I'm sure it's entirely self-explanatory, but if you happen to have some issues with that, you'll notice that down here at the bottom there's a link that says Need Help. Now that link takes you to the Rio Hondo Help page, and it may happen that the Rio Hondo Help page won't help you with the issues you're having. You know, for example, we're using Pearson's MyLab and Mastering. It's another portal that we integrate with Canvas. And so what I'm saying in a roundabout fashion is that it's unfortunate, but I'm not in a very strong position to help you troubleshoot various technical issues. So if you're having technical issues with Canvas, I would encourage you to reach out to the Rio Hondo Online Education Office and or the Canvas Learning Management System community. I'll show you the link for that in a bit. But if you're having issues with Pearson MyLab and Mastering, in other words, then what I would suggest is that you go out on the web and you search for Pearson support. You should be able to find your way to this page right here. At least that's how it looks right now. And at this location, Pearson has gathered a bunch of support articles regarding commonly encountered problems that people have with Pearson MyLab. So that would be your first line of defense if you're having some kind of an issue with Pearson MyLab. Like, for example, if you're trying to transition from free access to paid access without opening a new profile, you can come here and you can search for that. You'll notice how they have a link over here that says how to upgrade temporary access. And so that's an example of the type of support you can get here. Now, occasionally it happens that something comes up with MyLab. It may be unannounced system maintenance, or it may be that they have an outage of some kind. And so if you're wondering whether some kind of an issue you're experiencing with MyLab is on your end or on their end, a good way to check is to come to this page here, and you'll notice in the upper right-hand corner, there's a link that says System Status. So if you click on that, it will give you real-time information on known issues pertaining to all the different Pearson products. Now, the one that we're making use of is My Math Lab. So you're going to need to scroll down a little bit here, and you'll notice that there's My Math Lab here. And so if you click on that, it will show you the system status for the last 24 hours. And so you can see with everything green that there is no known issues at this time. You can go back if you want. You'll notice that there's a tab up there that allows you to look at the last 35 days of operation. Now, I've been using MyLab for a long time, and generally speaking, MyLab is pretty stable. There's not a lot of outages. There's not a lot of unplanned maintenance. There's not a lot of issues that come up, but occasionally there are. And so if that happens, then this is where you come to find out about that. And so when you're looking at Pearson's support setup here, you can contact them. You'll notice there's a link up here that allows you to contact. You can chat with them. You can phone them. Obviously, at the beginning of the term and at other times that are critical like that, you're going to find that it's heavy traffic. You may have to wait. But generally, Pearson has been very helpful, and I've found that when I've had issues, I can call them or I can chat with them, and I can generally get those resolved. People say that time is money, and I think that's a very helpful perspective sometimes. And I don't know if you know, but based on what I've seen in the past, it's not uncommon to see someone spend somewhere between 150 to 200 hours total working on a class like this one. And if you value your time, even if you value your time at, say, $10 an hour, how much is that 150 to 200 hours worth? Well, you can easily do the math, and you can see that it's worth somewhere between $1,500 to $2,000. And that's a good amount of money. And so we're trying to incentivize success. Our desire is that you would be successful in this class with one attempt. Not 2 attempts, not 3 attempts, but one and done. And that you'd be able to pass the course after one attempt. So towards that end, we're offering something we call supplemental instruction. This is nimble support for people who need it. And I don't know if you know, but I'm sure you can imagine, we typically see a wide range of needs and skill levels in a class like this. For example, we see people who recently graduated from high school and they took 4 years of math when they were high school students, and they may have even taken a couple of math courses at Rio or somewhere else, and they're basically ready. They're absolutely ready for the class. They don't need to review anything really. They're ready, and they have a very high probability of success. At the other end of the spectrum, I've had people in my classes over the years who may have graduated from high school 15, 20, even 30 years ago. And it may have been 15, 20, or even 30 years since their last math course. And so they have forgotten a considerable amount of what they learned previously, maybe even all of it, and they need to relearn a lot of things in order to succeed in the class. And of course, we have people all between those two extremes, right? Very commonly. And we would like to see everyone do well in the class. And so we're offering this supplemental instruction for anyone who might need it or anyone who might want it, and we're incentivizing it as well. So if you read the syllabus, what it explains effectively is that we have credited you in advance with the points for this supplemental instruction. It's already in your grade, in other words. And so your job is to hang on to those points. And the way you hang on to them is you make sure that your homework average stays above 70%, and you make sure that your exam average stays above 70%. And as long as that's the case, then we reckon that you have a very good chance of succeeding in the class. But if we start to see a dip in the homework scores, or we start to see a dip in the exam averages, that's troubling. And so at that point, I'll probably reach out to you and advise that in my experience, you could probably benefit from some form of supplemental instruction. And that is detailed in your syllabus, the various forms that you can pursue. So I would encourage you to consult your syllabus, and if you have any questions about that, feel free to reach out to me. We also have a good amount of statewide data that we've collected over the years that shows that there's various patterns associated with success. For example, we found that if your high school GPA falls within a certain range, then there's a probability that you're going to struggle. And so that's also detailed in your syllabus. So we're offering the supplemental instruction with the intent and the desire that it's going to help you to succeed in the class. And so hopefully you'll take advantage of it as needed. Moving along in the syllabus, I'm going to skip over the portion that talks about the grade breakdown and the weighting scheme that we use. In my experience, people seldom ask about that, and so that suggests to me that it's fairly self-explanatory. If it's not to you, you should feel free to ask about it. But anyway, I seldom get questions about that. What I'm showing you on the screen right here is a page from a student solutions manual. And as you can see, it presents a detailed solution to a problem from a math text. Now, if you compare this with what you find in the back of most math texts, you'll find that in the back of your math book, you typically have answers for the odd exercises, but they're just that. They're answers. They're cursory. And there's very little, if any, explanation regarding how to obtain those answers. And so that's where the Student Solutions Manual differs, because it does contain a detailed explanation of how to obtain those answers for the odd problems, usually. That's what they usually cover. Now, I mention this because the next thing I want to talk about is the textbook and the bundle. Something that I get a lot of questions regarding is the textbook. So what usually happens is that someone goes to the college website and they look up the book that we're requiring for a class. And they see a title, they see an ISBN, and they see a price, but there's not a lot of additional detail. And so they go to some other website and they see a different ISBN, maybe a different title, maybe slightly different, different price, and different options. And they're wondering, what should I do? What's the best option? And so I'm not a shill for the college bookstore. I am not compensated by them or anything like that. But I just want to suggest to you that for many people, the bundle, which is being sold at the college bookstore, is not a bad deal. And all you have to do is do the math on that and understand what it contains in order to come to that realization. So let me help you with that. The bundle that we usually offer in the college bookstore contains a hard copy text, a student solutions manual, and a MyLab license. And so if you price those components separately, generally speaking, you're going to find that those components individually are much more expensive than what you're paying for the bundle. You're saving some money by buying the bundle, in other words. Now, I'm not saying that everyone needs to do that. If you can make it work for yourself with a digital edition of a text, hey, more power to you. I'm not a book policeman. And so all I want is to see you succeed in the class, and, it's on you how you work out the textbook situation. But what I am suggesting is that if you think about what's in the bundle, okay, for most classes, in my experience, having a hard copy text is not a bad thing. For example, if you're taking a class like statistics, that's a class that's about 95% word problems. And so having a hard copy text is helpful because it's difficult to juggle digital things, whether you're looking at a homework problem and then you have to look back at a digital version of the text and so on, right? Especially if you're working on a laptop. So even though I'm kind of old school and I definitely have a preference for hard copy books, I still think that for most people in this day and age, hard copy of their math text is a good thing. Now, the MyLab license costs a certain amount of money as well, and if you buy it as a standalone, you can easily go to Pearson's website and see what that's going to cost. When you look at the main thing that adds value to the bundle, it is the Student Solutions Manual. And it really doesn't add that much to the bundle price. And again, if you value your time being money, even if you value your time at just $10 an hour, how much are you going to save when you consider that you can simply look up how to do a particular problem with a detailed solution in the Student Solutions Manual, or you can puzzle out how to obtain that cursory answer in the back of the book on your own. How many hours of your time is that worth? Is it 3 hours, 4 hours? I mean, usually the bundle price, when you compare bundle price versus, say, Amazon or whatever, if you're buying the same things, you're going to pay more on some other website. So bottom line, the bundle is not a bad deal. And for most people, that Student Solutions Manual is an enormous time saver. It's going to help save time and energy and frustration, and it's going to preserve momentum, and it's going to keep things smooth. It's going to make you more efficient at doing your work. That's my experience. Your mileage may vary. However, one thing you should know regarding the MyLab license is that it is valid for the life of the stock edition. So what that means on a practical level is that if your instructor is, if you have to repeat the class and your instructor is using the same materials, you should not have to pay for an additional MyLab license. You can use the MyLab license for the course as many times as you need it, as long as the stock edition is the current one. So for example, in our college algebra course, we are using right now Sullivan's 4th edition. And as long as the 4th edition is the current edition, then the MyLab license associated with that should be valid. Okay, so very important you understand that. And if you have any questions, as usual, reach out and ask. The next thing that I want to talk about is the homework. Specifically, how do you get access to the homework assignments? So at this point, we are using a single sign-on environment. What that means on a practical level is that we have taken a Rio Hondo Canvas portal shell and we have paired it with a MyLab course. And so in order to get access to the homework, what you have to do is log into Canvas, and you need to pair your Rio Hondo Canvas profile with a MyLab profile. Now, if you have an existing MyLab profile, you're welcome to continue using that. And we'll show you how to make that happen in just a moment here. If you are creating a new MyLab profile, I would ask you very humbly to help me with one thing. At the beginning of a term, I usually have about 200 people in my various sections. And it takes me a while to get to know who's who. So one thing, which is a tremendous source of confusion, and it can cause hassles for both of us, is when someone has a certain name on their Rio Hondo profile and then they register for MyLab using a different name. For example, maybe somebody registered at Rio Hondo before they got married. And once they got married, they changed their name. And they didn't update their Rio Hondo profile. But they registered for MyLab using their married name. Now, in that case, I'm not privy to that knowledge. And so all I see is I look at my rosters and I see 2 people who may be the same person, but may not be the same person. I don't know. There's no way for me to tell. So I am asking you that when you register for MyLab, please use exactly the same name that you have on your Rio Hondo College profile. It's the same name you have in your Canvas profile. That's going to help me to know who you are, and it's going to help me to save both of us hassles. If I end up dropping you because of this type of confusion, you can lose your financial aid, for example. And so it's very, very important that I know who you are, and I'm not confused if you have two different names. Now, if you have a different name on your existing MyLab profile, you might be able to change it. I'm not really sure. I don't think so. You'd probably have to reach out to Pearson for that purpose, but it would suffice probably for you to just let me know, hey, you know what, I'm so-and-so on your Rio Hondo roster, and I'm using a different name on my MyLab and Mastering profile. And hopefully that will then prevent that type of confusion from taking place. Now, like we were saying, you have to pair a MyLab profile with your Rio Hondo Canvas profile. And if you're interested in getting a temporary access code, it's very easy to miss that during that pairing process. So let me show you very briefly. In the welcome to the class email, I'm going to send you a link to this page right here. At least that's how it looks at the time of this recording. I'm sure they may change that later. So you'll notice that there's instructions here in PDF, Word document, and video form for pairing Canvas with a MyLab profile. And so if you take a look at the video, it is a bit dated, but it has the key elements that we need here. It's going to walk you through that pairing process. So you can see that the person who's doing the video is showing you how to log into a Canvas profile, and then they're going to show you how to pair with an existing MyLab profile, or a new one for that matter. Now let me skip ahead to the part that's of interest to us. You'll be able to watch the video for yourself, and so you'll see everything that you need to see there, but you're going to eventually be confronted with this screen during that pairing process. And so it's inviting you to sign in with your existing Pearson account or to create a Pearson account. And so if you're creating the account, take a look. This is the part that's really easy to miss, and I realize that with the resolution it's probably very hard to see this, but down here near the bottom of this video there's a little blurb that says, waiting for financial aid, get temporary access without payment for 14 days. That is the link that you need if you're looking for a temporary access code. So you would click on that link, and it would then walk you through a process where it would ask for an email and so on and so forth. And that's where we're asking, please make sure that the name you enter is exactly the same name as we have in your Canvas profile. Okay, that'll help me not to be confused, and I'll thank you in advance for that. Now, something else to be aware of, that 14 days of temporary access goes by pretty fast, and we really don't want to have a lapse between when that access expires and when you establish paid access. We have exams that come fairly early in the term. We have assignments that come fairly early. And if your MyLab access has lapsed, you're not going to be able to do those things. You won't be able to do homework. You won't be able to do exams. And so the syllabus speaks to that, but you have to understand that it's very important not to let that lapse. Now, I'm also going to include a link regarding how to go from the temporary access to paid access without opening a second profile. That is very important, because we cannot transfer scores easily within MyLab. And so if you do that, if you open a second profile, that is a real problem, and it's going to cost you some points for that, for the hassle that's associated with that. Something else I wanted to mention regarding homework. You can see I'm logged into MyLab here, and I'm working on a homework problem. Now, I'm not logged in through Canvas, but I'm logged in through MyLab, and so it's going to look a little different when you're working on it, but pretty much the same. So anyway, I'm working on this question here. It asked me, is there a local maximum at x is 4? Well, I think, no, there's not. So I check my answer, and it says, well, you're wrong. And then it's asking me another question here. The local minimum is, and so I'll put in a value. Let's say I think it's y equals 5. So check my answer, and unfortunately that's also wrong. And then it's asking me to respond, so I do, and check my answer again, and unfortunately it's wrong. And now it's the final check. MyLab allows you 3 bites at the apple, and then it's going to mark the question wrong if you haven't answered the part correctly. So try it again, final check, and unfortunately it's incorrect. Now notice how it says similar question right here. this is an important thing that a lot of people overlook. It allows you effectively to polish up your homework scores as long as you're doing it before the deadline, so that you get every problem correct and you get 100% on every assignment. If you select similar question, you'll see that it does in fact give you a similar question. Let me make the graph a little larger here for you. And so at that point, you can effectively start over on that particular question. Another thing that's very helpful for many people when they're working on homework in MyLab is a feature called Help Me Solve This. You can access it by going up here to the Question Help menu, and you'll notice that the first item on the menu is Help Me Solve This. If you click on that, it's going to open a dialog box, and it's basically going to walk you through the various parts of the problem. And so if you're wondering how to get through a particular part, this is a very helpful feature, and people make extensive use of it, as they should. The one thing you should keep in mind, though, is that when you take exams, there is no Help Me Solve This feature. And so even though you may make extensive use of it while you're working on homework, at some point you have to transition away from it, and you have to kind of stand on your own 2 feet, as it were, and make sure you can answer exam questions correctly without that type of support. So feel free to use it liberally, but understand that everything has costs and benefits. Now, another thing we should mention, let me close this here. It's sort of an obvious point, but in my experience, a lot of people excel at ignoring the obvious. So let me share some perspective with you, okay? When you take a face-to-face course, a traditional face-to-face lecture course, your instructor effectively sets the pace with their lectures, with their examples, and all of that. There is some instructor set pace in an online class, but there's much less than there is in a face-to-face class. And so one thing that's very easy to do, especially if it's the first time you're taking an online course, you can fall behind very easily. And so your syllabus will provide you with some guidance regarding the number of sections from the text that you ought to be getting through on a daily basis or a weekly basis in order to keep pace with the class. It's actually very easy to understand how this number is achieved. All you have to do is look at the number of sections that we're going to cover and then divide by the number of weeks that we have in the term. So for example, in this case, you can look at the syllabus there, and it says plainly that you need to do somewhere between 3 to 6 chapter sections per week, or roughly one every other day, in order to keep pace with the course. And it's an important thing to keep your eye on that, because it is very, very easy to fall behind. And we do try to provide some structure. We have due dates for the homeworks. We have penalties for late work, which, by the way, we don't waive. So thank you in advance for not asking. They're not a severe penalty. I mean, we're penalizing you 5% per day, basically on the parts of the homework that's submitted late. So if you had like a 20 question assignment and you got the first 19 questions correct and they were submitted on time before the deadline, then we would only be penalizing you on the last question that was submitted late, which I think is a very fair way to go about that. In any case, it's very, very important not to fall behind. It's so easy to do. And so please make sure you're paying extra attention to the fact that an online class is much more slippery in some respects than a face-to-face class. You don't have me standing up in front of you, giving examples and setting the pace effectively. You'll find that a couple 3 pages of the syllabus are devoted to covering the policy regarding exams. And that's because exams are so important. The lion's share of your course grade comes from your exam performance. And so it's very important you have a clear understanding of what the rules of the game are. So one of the things that I'll mention, I've already talked about this very briefly before, but you're only allowed certain graphing calculators when you take exams. So basically anything from the TI 83 or 84 line is acceptable. But if you're using a calculator that has a built-in computer algebra system, that's a problem. And so you can get flagged for cheating if you're caught using that type of a calculator. Likewise, internet-connected devices like tablets or cell phones are not permitted during exams because they're internet connected. And if you're found to be using something like that, then that's going to be a problem as well. So please be careful to understand the policy regarding cheating. It's very unpleasant to have to enforce that, but I'll do what I have to do. Something else regarding exams you should know is that we don't do makeup exams. So if you miss any one particular exam for whatever reason, doesn't matter, I will replace that missing exam score with the percentage score from your final exam at the end of the term. Now, of course, that means we're going to be carrying a 0 on the books for the duration. And so your grade is going to appear to be artificially deflated because of that 0. I mean, obviously we can't put anything in there. We don't know how you're going to do on the final. But that's something to keep in mind. If you miss more than one exam, the syllabus speaks to that, and that's not recommended. It makes it very, very hard to pass the course if you're going to miss more than one of the exams. Now, your syllabus will explain to you where you're going to be taking exams and when you're going to be taking exams. And so I'll leave that to you to read. I'm sure that you can read it. I usually don't get a lot of questions about that. I think it's fairly clear and fairly self-explanatory. In the interest of brevity, I'm going to move as rapidly as I can through the rest of the syllabus. So just a few other highlights to mention here. You can see that I'm back to my MyLab homework assignment. And occasionally people have questions about homework, and the most effective way to ask those questions is as follows. If you go up here to question help, you can select that, and you can see that there's a little blurb here that says ask my instructor. I greatly appreciate when you make use of this, because effectively what's going to happen is that MyLab is going to send me a link to the exact version of the question that you were working on. It makes it very easy for me to go right to see where you were at and to figure out what kind of a problem you were having, and hopefully to give you an answer as rapidly as possible. So if you send me an email in some other fashion, say through Canvas or through just emailing me directly, it's not as efficient. So just for homework related questions, I'll thank you in advance for using this Ask My Instructor feature. It really helps me to help you in the most efficient fashion. While we're on the topic of email, I would like to request that if you're going to email me about something other than homework, that you not message me through Canvas. I think I mentioned previously that when you send me a message through Canvas, it is automatically routed to a less visible portion of my inbox, and it's a hassle. So I much prefer that if you're not emailing me about homework, that you use my email address, which is visible at the top of the screen here, and email me directly. And please keep in mind, I've got like 5 sections in a typical term, and so I greatly appreciate when you help me to connect the dots. In other words, if you include in the subject header, hey, I'm emailing, regarding such and such a class, or you put that in the message body as well. And if you want to ask me about grades or anything that is sensitive in nature, I have to have a Rio Hondo student ID number in order to verify your identity. If we don't have that in the thread, then we have to go through the dance where I email you back and like, okay, what's your ID number, blah, blah, blah. And so we can just cut to the chase if you remember when you're asking about something like that to include that ID number in the email thread. Now I'm skipping around here, but one other thing I want to mention is regarding attendance. So for my online section, since we don't really have face-to-face meetings where I can take attendance, the way that I handle attendance in the early part of the class is I look to see who is registered at MyLab. So in other words, the Canvas roster has everyone who's registered for the class by default, and that doesn't really provide me with any useful information regarding attendance. So the way you signal that you're participating in the class is you make sure that you're registered for MyLab within the prescribed window of time. And if you're not registered on MyLab by that time, then I will have no choice but to drop you for non-participation. It's no different than the face-to-face classes. In that case, though, I'm taking attendance at each meeting. And so when someone misses a meeting during the first 2 weeks of class, which is the time that I'm trying to manage my seats and my enrollment and everything else, and they don't contact me by email about that in a very timely fashion, then I will take that as a message from them that they no longer wish to participate, and I will drop them post haste. So I do police my rosters, and it's kind of a necessary thing. I wish I didn't have to bother, but what can I do? Please help me to help you. Final thoughts here. You might have noticed that in the back of the syllabus, we have this thing called the assignment, schedule, and calendar. And I want to make sure to emphasize that all of the times you find mentioned in this and elsewhere in the syllabus are Pacific time. Likewise on MyLab, likewise in Canvas. So if you happen to be in some other time zone and you're taking the course, understand it's on you to make that adjustment. Okay? Everything is in Pacific time. Now, as far as the assignment calendar is concerned, one of the things that it provides you with is a pacing. It also tells you what the individual exams are going to cover and when they're going to be and all of that kind of a thing. So you definitely won't be ignoring this, but at the same time, you have to understand that my standard operating procedure is not to release a syllabus revision for minor things. So say, for example, my lab had an outage for a couple of hours, and maybe it happened to conflict with one of my homework assignments. So what I would do in that case is I would log into my lab and I would push that back a reasonable amount of time to allow people to take care of that. But I'm not going to release a new syllabus that has that date revised in it. So in other words, the dates that you find in my lab, they're going to propagate to Canvas. And so those dates are going to trump the dates that you find here in the syllabus, because I do not generally issue syllabus revisions unless something major changes, or unless, I don't do syllabus revisions generally. In all the years that I've been teaching, it's a very, very rare thing. Occasionally I'll find a significant typo, but generally at this point in time, I do not do syllabus revisions. So if you're finding some kind of dissonance between the dates in my lab and the dates in the assignment calendar, it could be a typo, or more likely, the date in my lab was revised to reflect circumstances. So please keep that in mind. So with that, I think I've said what I need to say. If you finish looking over the syllabus and you have any questions regarding any of the parts, please feel free to reach out and email me directly. I'll be happy to field your questions. I'd like to wish you the very best of success in the class. I hope that the class will be a benefit to you and that you will greatly enjoy it. It's my privilege to be your instructor. Best of luck this term.